I would like to give everybody here on the stage with me a moment to introduce themselves as well.
Mark Baird, Wholesome Harvest Farms. We are a farm in Tipton County, Indiana, just north of here. A traditional, started out as traditional commodity farming, and we've expanded to some direct-to-consumer products as well.
Good morning. My name's Robert Frew. I'm from Sobremesa Farm. Myself and Juan Carlos Arango were the two that started the farm. And our goal at the farm is really to sort of be an inclusive element in the community of Bloomington that hosts different events for all ages and people from lots of different backgrounds, representing different ethnic groups. We try to host a lot of culturally specific events at the farm, including presenters who are from other cultural language groups. And we endeavor to reach out to the larger community in southern Indiana and help educate them about the importance of soil and water conservation and different remediation methods that can be used on a farm.
Good morning, everyone. I am Denise Jamerson, and I am from southern Indiana. I'm from a place called Lyle Station, Indiana, which is the last remaining African-American farming settlement in Indiana. I grew up on a farm, which is Greer Farms, and my father is still farming at 86, and he's also recognized as one of the last African-American farmers still farming land that's been in our family since pre-Civil War. So I'm a generational farmer. Me and my family have created Legacy Taste of the Garden, and one of our missions is to show people a sustainable, viable lifestyle through agriculture, from the youth to the seniors to succession planning, and making sure that we can educate and help all who want to farm and all who want to continue to keep the farms in their land, in their families, their legacies.
Thank you. So I think you just queued me up perfectly for the first question here. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about connecting to place and thinking about those that came before us. Denise and Mark, both of you have families with long histories in agriculture, and I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit, and all of us a little bit, about how that's changed over the years and what that connection to place means.
So I think the biggest change for us, a fifth-generation farm to start out with. So the farm's been in the family for over 100 years. Tipton County is a very primitive county when it was settled, and a lot of work had to go into clearing and draining the land. Of course, initially, a lot of farms were vertically integrated with everything from chickens to hogs to crops and whatnot, and eventually melding into commodity farms, which we still have, and that's the majority of farms probably in America right now that feeds America. We've diversified and are still in the process of doing that, and I think the biggest change is the direct-to-consumer movement over the last probably 10 to 20 years. And that's really helped us not only communicate with our consumers directly, to explain to them what farming is about. And I think that's one of the things that we can do as farmers is better communicate with the end user. What we found that works for us in central Indiana is farmers markets. So we have the ability and the opportunity to communicate with those consumers each and every week. And we really enjoy making them understand what we do, because there's a lot of misconceptions, as you know, about what we do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's educating them on organic, non-GMO, all sorts of things. So that's the biggest change for us, is the direct-to-consumer movement that's taken place over the last several years.
So for us, in rural southern Indiana and being African-American farmers, I think that the change that is seen, that I have seen and experienced, is seeing the decline of African American farmers. So with that being said, and my dad still farming, my son wanting to go into farming, the accessibility. So when my dad came up, he worked with the mule. Him and his sister, plowed the field with the mules. Change came, he went into big ag. It was available and accessible for him to be able to do that. As time went on, it was not so easy. A lot of land loss, we've seen that. So fast forward to my son going into agriculture, just being able to change. Agriculture is always changing. That's where I'm saying my dad had to change from a mule. He went to combines and tractors and commodities from produce. And so now there has to be a change in order to stay into agriculture, is what we see. And making that change is being able to make people aware of their food. It went from family farms to big farm. So now we're back to changing again to knowing who your farmer is, where your food comes from, how important agriculture is to a lifestyle, to families. So that change, knowing that you have to change. Agriculture is always changing. And I think that going forward, that's what we try to teach people, that there's opportunities, there's a lifestyle, it's a viable lifestyle, sustainable lifestyle, but you have to be willing to acknowledge change and make the change.
Being responsive, right? Robert, you are not coming from a multi-generational farm, and so I'm wondering if you can enlighten some of these folks who may already know quite a bit about this, but about some of the challenges and what the experience of being a first-generation farmer in Indiana has been like.
Sure. Yeah, that's probably something that Juan Carlos and I both have really found to be a challenge, because when you start from very little knowledge and you're trying to create a business centered around growing food and really helping a community around you connect with what's happening on a small-scale farm, how do they work, and what is their real ethos. And at our farm, we really wanted to focus on the background, the strong backgrounds that we both had, and that was in being volunteers and working with the National Wildlife Federation. So through that experience, we realized the value of native species here in Indiana and understanding how it is that we could really help others to be able to connect with that important component of being on a piece of land. How can you maintain part of it for habitat for the different species that you really want to help you to farm? And that's something that took many years to learn. We've gotten better at it, and we've also helped to educate others along the way about the importance of utilizing all the different components together on a small-scale farm where you're trying to grow organically, sustainably, and you're trying to make a favorable ecological impact around you. So that, for us, I think, has really been the most important part of our journey, is figuring out how we can stay connected to the community around us and help educate them better on what they can do to help somewhat mitigate these extremes that we're experiencing in the climate.
I love that you all have such a commitment to education too. You said it was hard for you to gain some of that knowledge when you were starting out, and it seems like you're probably filling a bit of that role for others now that are coming up after you. So it's coming full circle, right? All right, so moving on. We know that Indiana imports 98% of its produce. And this in spite of the fact that in the most recent USDA Ag Census in 2017, we have over 56,000 farms in Indiana. It's quite an interesting paradigm. And I'm wondering if any of you can speak to some of the challenges that might be contributing to it.
Well, I think one of the challenges, specifically around the produce side of it, is we have many preparers of food. One of the biggest preparers of food that goes to the restaurant facilities is Park 100 Foods, and ironically, they are located in our county, which is one of the most productive counties in the state, if not the nation. But none of their produce comes from Tipton County. It's all shipped in. And the reason is that we lack the infrastructure to process that produce. They want it ready to put in the pot, so to speak, and there's not that facility there to help that along. Obviously, the costs and the infrastructure necessary is prohibitive to most farms, so that's when cooperative farming comes into place, and we need to continue to get help to put those facilities together. But I would say those aggregators and those middle links that seem to be missing for us, so that we can actually supply the produce and the food to those entities that are preparing it for the larger schools, restaurants, and even end users in the grocery stores.
And if I could speak to that a little bit, I think that what you're saying is very true. And then when you are looking at the numbers, those are the numbers that are your commodity farmers. They're not your produce farmers that we are here. We may not be counted, but they don't know how prevalent we are and that we are in the communities and that we are growing this food. And like you said, we are in a space to where we need the infrastructure in order to even compete with the bigger companies that are out there that are also producing or bringing the food in and not really looking at where they are and where we are.
Would you like to add anything, Robert?
I could add a little bit to that. And again, you know, our story is somewhat different because of the sort of the newness of everything that we're doing at the farm. But we really wanted a way to engage the community that doesn't often have access to food that I would consider first class. And that is food that is organically grown, food that is extremely fresh, harvested, preferably the same day, and at the consumer's home that same day. So that was a challenge for us. We tried to really figure out how can we make that happen. And on a small scale farm, one of the ways to do that is connect with the community, get a community-supported agriculture agreement in place with different consumers, and also to engage with the pantries. And fortunately in Indiana, there were funds that came down through COVID, and as Mark mentioned about an aggregator earlier, there was someone in Bloomington, an organization that was willing to take that on. So that was a way to help farmers, particularly BIPOC farmers, to really engage with their community in a way they perhaps had not been able to do so before because of a lack of funding, a lack of a consistent stream of customers, so to speak, through pantries. And for us, in this past year, I think that has really been probably the greatest learning curve we've had to experience in the portion of the farm that provides food. The other parts we're still working on as far as engaging the community, but this part of growing food for your local community has really been a great experience for us in the sense that we can stay connected, we can engage people to come to the farm, see how their food is grown, and that is not something that was the experience of my grandparents or any of my uncles and aunts. Farms were very closed off from the rest of the community. So I think that model is maybe a little unique for us.
Absolutely. I've heard it touched on a little bit here, this emphasis on commodity crops in Indiana, which, you know, I view as one of the biggest barriers to eating more local fruits and vegetables and produce. Mark, you've also talked a little bit about how more commodity growers are trying to shift that. You yourself are diversifying your income streams. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what inspired that decision, and I'll follow up in a little bit with Denise about maybe what some of the barriers are for folks that are coming up. You all do a lot of advocacy and mentorship in the community as well, and there's a lot of barriers out there for folks that are just getting started out. So.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest barriers is the amount of money to enter the farming business. If anybody's checked out a new price of a new combine or a new tractor, it's astronomical. The average, I would say, the average farmer simply can't afford that. So if we want to perpetuate our farm to the next generation, we realized that we had to do something a little bit different, and that's the whole direct-to-consumer part of it. If you cut out the middleman, you gain the middleman's profit, if you will. So that's what we've endeavored to do. It's not our only stream of income, as Denise said. It can't be our only stream of income, at least right now, but there's a real possibility that it could be. And I think, we started small in this, and it has grown over the last several years, and we're optimistic that it can sustain a farm to multiple generations. The other thing is the equipment that it takes to do small-scale farming is not the large-scale equipment. So the capital intensiveness of that smaller-scale farm is very attractive to those that want to be into farming. And we're optimistic. Like I said, education is very important to us. And once you start to educate the consumer, they're behind you. They support you. They understand your predicament and are better able and better equipped with empathy behind your cause. We're not looking for a handout. We're looking for a viable way to make a living. And I think we've found a niche that I think can be perpetuated.
Denise, go ahead. Yeah.
I agree with that. Like you said, to get into farming now is really controlled. The commodity farming, like what my father is doing, everything that he does, where he started, it wasn't controlled. He could keep his seed and plant it the next season. He could, he had some control over the fertilizer that he used or over the seed that he used, where now he doesn't have any control. So he really, his profits, like you said, is not really like it used to be. To get into the farming, I understand now what I didn't understand before. Even when I was growing up, we ran the other business, which was the animals and the food and the garden, while he was doing the commodity crops of the wheat and the corn and the soybeans. And I have learned that all farmers still had to do that, be diversified. So it's not just the commodity crops that helped them to survive as farmers. It was being diversified. And then now I understand why the farmers around me, which are the aging farmers, have meticulous equipment. My dad just don't let anybody drive his equipment. And he's had, in our community, it was a farming community. He had young men that always worked with him. He showed them how to farm. And now, just not anybody could get on the combine. Just not anybody can go jump on the tractor because he can't afford a $200,000 piece of equipment now, whereas before he could buy the whole set. That's what he told me. I could buy the tractor, I could get the planter, I could get the header, but now it's so much more. And then for the next generation coming up, if they're not allowed to make the profits from what they're putting in the fields, then they're at a disadvantage. So the thing is that teaching them the new ways, teaching them to diversify, teaching them the specialty crops, and being open to being able to do that. And I think that that comes along with the succession planning. Planning for the farm to continue, for the legacy to continue. We have to take all those things into consideration, that if that piece of equipment breaks down, we can't just count on the price that we're going to get at the grain elevator. But we can go to the farmers markets and sell our produce and get into programs to help feed the community and get the community to know and to trust and to believe and to support us.
Absolutely. Denise, do you want to talk at all about the narrative of farming in Indiana and some of the misconceptions?
I think that one of the misconceptions was that there were no BIPOC farmers in Indiana. But with me coming from an African American farming community, we kind of debunked that misconception. We created like the Black Loom Conference so that we could connect. Number one, we could show the visibility that there are BIPOC farmers in Indiana. They may not be in that number of the 56,000, but we're here, we're growing, we're providing for our communities, and to connect them with the agencies and the services that are there so that the agencies and services know that we're here and that we can benefit from the programs that are out there designated for us. Because I think that a lot of us did not know or did not understand that there are programs that can help us to do what we do. And I also feel as though that there's a misconception about farming, not being able to get into it, but there's still a desire. Farmers have a desire to provide, and that desire is still here, very much rooted in Indiana and in the Indiana farm, hometown families.
Absolutely. Mark, I know when we talked last week, you had some thoughts about some of the misconceptions about farming in Indiana.
Yes, and I think it's carried on by the popular media that all farmers are now corporate farmers, or they have all their land has been taken to a corporate farm. Now, to be sure, that is a pressure. That is a pressure in Indiana as well as across the nation. In our county, we were probably the #1 county producing seed corn for the rest of the nation at one point in time. One of the major growers or one of the major providers or processors moved out the growers several years ago. And I think that was the beginning of trying to figure out what we're going to do as farmers as far as diversification. But the point is, there are still some legacy seed companies left in the area, and they're putting tremendous pressure on land prices that the average farmer simply can't afford, or they find it very difficult to finance. But having said that, most of the farms we have in our county are family legacy farms. The farm landowner may not farm themselves, but the farmer that's renting that land is a local farmer, or at least local in the sense of the region. So there are pressures from corporate farms, but I think we can do a better job maybe of educating the public that, hey, there's a lot of family farms around here. And there's a lot of folks that just because the name on the plat book says ABC LLC, that doesn't mean that it's a corporate farm. It means it's organized in a corporation in order to better efficiently use Uncle Sam's tax code. So anyway, that's one of the things that we had talked about beforehand, and I wanted to make sure and announce, not that you don't already know that, but I think the family farm is alive. It may not be well all the time, but it is definitely alive.
I'm going to throw a wild card in here because I'm hearing a theme here about cooperation and family. And you just mentioned the family farm may not always be well. So what does success look like? And what does that social sustainability look like for the family farm?
Education. Education and access. For me, is getting the information to the legacy farm families to be able to make that change, so that they can more benefit. Because like I said, when the generation before me went into farming, it was not like it is now. So it is imperative that, number one, we educate the legacy families on how to do a succession plan, on how to do a business plan, and bringing the whole family into the operation of understanding farming. And the landowners, because where I'm at, there are a lot of landowners. My dad does a lot of the farming for the families that are not there, so they're landowners, but they need a succession plan. They need to understand that they need a succession plan, because there are buzzards out there flying around waiting to get that land. But in order for us to help them, for me, it is to be able to educate them and to help them and to guide them and to bring trusted information in to help them in their successional planning and communicating that.
It's so important. Yeah, the succession planning. We hosted a workshop, this was pre-COVID, so I mean, it was probably a good 5 years ago, and every farmer that showed up to that workshop, and they're small-scale farmers, they're in their, they're first-generation farmers, but not one of them had considered the importance of that business side of things, and what happens if they get hit by a bus tomorrow. How do you plan for that, and how do you plan for that sustainability? So I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
Well, it was a true wake-up call for our family. I took a workshop, and they were like, easy things like, where are the keys to the combine? What? But when my dad is the accountant, he's the marketer, he's the grower, that's old farming. That's the old way of farming and not the business model.
Farmers like to do it all. It's not just the farmer hat, it's the business hat, the marketing hat. Robert, what does success or sustainability look like on the family farm?
I think for us, we, again, with like what Denise said, this education is really important. That's one of the things that we do at Sobremesa Farm. We try to help share with others what we have learned from other experts and make that knowledge more accessible to people who are interested in learning maybe how to start their own farm. And we do that by sharing some of the challenges that we had moving into a community that was perhaps dominated by legacy farmers, and trying to access some of the services locally, finding out who is really the best excavator in the area, who are those key people that you need to have in your phone or your Rolodex, and that can help you be successful on your farm, because you really cannot do it all. You do have to have a core support group, and many of those people are professionals in other fields. And one of the things we learned as volunteers with the National Wildlife Federation was that when we got engaged in activities that we wanted to roll out to the community, that we wanted the community to embrace and to learn about, was that we really had better luck doing that when we enlisted the help of other organizations like Soil and Water Conservation District or the NRCS, and other entities within every community in the United States that really focuses on many of the same goals that you may have as a small-scale farmer. So you have to look for those ways of helping you to be successful, and you have to sort of craft that based upon where you are in the United States and what are those other organizations that are close enough to you that it's easy for you to engage with each other and can see that you are there to also support them. So it has to be a give and take situation in order to really maximize all that they have to offer and everything that you have to offer to them in exchange.
Anything to add, Mark?
Yeah, I would agree with both Robert and Denise on the education front. And I think what will produce success, at least for us, is continuing to do a lot of the same things that we're doing, but to be open enough for new ideas. And one example that I can share with you is just a few years ago, we started an agritourism branch of the business that's a U-Pick pumpkin patch. In fact, that'll be open tomorrow for anybody that's interested. Shameless plug there. East Union Farms pumpkin patch just north of here. But anyway, but that was something new for us. We had never ventured into that and was sort of cautious what's going to happen when we have, thousands of people overrun the farm. Well, again, it's another opportunity for education. It's another opportunity to share the bounty that we see around us with other people. It's another opportunity for people to figure out, how do I pick a pumpkin? Or, do I have to pull the stem off, or do I need a saw to pull that stem off? Or is this one ready, or is it not ready? Or can I pick a green pumpkin? Sure, you can pick a green pumpkin, but you're gonna have to pay it per pound, whatever it is. So, but anyway, I think it's always thinking about sustainability and what that next generation needs to push forward. And hopefully we will continue to do that, and I would encourage other farmers to look ahead. The farming group is an older group. Denise talked about her father. They're not necessarily always open to change. And my brothers are quite a lot older than I am, and they run a lot of the commodity operation on the farm and the extended family's farm. But they have been open to change, and that's the key to this, is to be open to change. If you're not, then I think there's a real problem on succession. And you see a lot of that. You see a lot of farms going to auction, not because they're not sustainable if they were run a different way, but because there's not an interest from a family member to carry that on. They see the dollar signs and they get attracted by that. And that's when sometimes the larger corporate farms step in and buy that farm. If we can stay close to our neighbor, stay close to a relationship with our neighbor, build a relationship with that farm that we've been farming for years, then maybe we have the opportunity to purchase that farm and expand our farm instead of trying to compete with folks that we really can't compete with in a public auction. Public auctions are great for those folks that need them to sustain their livelihood, but relationships build farms over the course of the year, whether that's direct to consumer or whether that's business to business.
I'm going to pause for a moment and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Hi, my name is Juanita Brandt. I just happen to be a state rep from Ohio. For those who are wondering why I'm here, I sit as a ranking member on agriculture in the Ohio House, and 14 years in 4-H. So farming, poultry is what I grew up doing as a kid in Cleveland, and we had a farm in Geauga. Small short story. Reason why I'm asking questions is because here in the state of Ohio, we just implemented a policy called the First-Time Farmers Tax Credit. So as we talk about farmers being able to transition into farming, and then farmers who, and I actually have a question with this, but I'm making a statement. Policy is king, so we just implemented this program called the First-Time Farmers Tax Credit, which allows farmers who are buying property from an older farmer or whoever, and it's less than 10 years, can get up to $1 million in a tax credit from the state of Ohio. But that also helps the existing farmer who wants to sell because they also benefit from the tax credit. So it's kind of like everybody benefits from that. So that just got started in April of this year in Ohio. So we don't know how well that's going to go because the marketing has been piss poor, to be for real. Marketing is everything. You can have a great policy, but if you don't have the marketing, it's everything. So this is where I asked you guys. You sit here, it's quite a few of us who are all elected. We all sit on our respective ag committees, and our different state houses. I think it's about 6 states over here, and we're all elected. What type of policy needs to occur on the state level? Let's not talk federal, because none of us are in Congress or U.S. senators yet. Shameless plug for my friend JD. But what type of policy should we be implementing? Because I keep hearing about how we are not keeping farmers in place. Also, like even in Ohio, we have like these 0% loans that we offer our farmers because we know capital is king and people just need access to capital. I don't think Ohio has it all together because we just implemented both of these programs this year. Who knows what's gonna happen with it? But tell us what we need to be doing on the side of government to better help make sure that you guys can sustain yourselves long term. Thank you.
I hope we have some folks from Indiana listening to those new policies happening in Ohio, because I think we could benefit from some of those. Who wants to jump in on the policy question?
Well, I'll jump in just briefly. You know, your policies, I think, are excellent because you hit at the heart of what some of the problems are for beginning farmers, and that's financing. How do I get started? Again, when you look at a combine or a tractor or whatnot, a new one costing what it is, it's virtually impossible to even set your mind to farming when that's the case. But I think you have at least a baseline in those programs that I think a lot of states could learn from. One thing that hasn't been mentioned here that hopefully people have an interest in is renewable energy. And I think a lot of farms in Indiana especially have the opportunity to, at least farmland owners, have the opportunity to look at both solar and wind. And I know in our county, we have a rather large wind farm, which has been great for the community, great for the county. Farms can benefit because it doesn't take as much land as a solar farm. But there has been a groundswell of opponents out there that either don't understand the farm background and the farm land property rights issue, and they are scared to death for whatever reason of windmills and solar panels. So it doesn't sound like it's close to what we're talking about, but it really is, in that policy comes from the state. It comes from the state, and I'll point to what Illinois did in making a lot of those decisions at the state level instead of at the county level. Because when you have a hodgepodge of ordinances from one county to the other, it's extremely difficult for these developers that are out there trying to put larger wind farms or solar farms together to even come together to say that we're going to try this when they know one county may be receptive, another county may not be, one township may say no. The people get up in arms because of things they really don't understand. So state policy, and we almost had it in Indiana a couple years ago. It got right up to the finish line and the ball got dropped for whatever reason. So from a state policy perspective, renewable energy can help the farmland owners out tremendously, but we need some consistency across the state.
Denise, I see you're ready to answer the policy question.
Yeah. For me, we're not in Missouri, but it's called Show Me. Okay, so what better example? That's why I am here, is because I am a black farmer, right? And people got to see black farmers to even know that there are black farmers, that there were black farmers, and that we are here. So, two parts. You know, what you're doing is great because the existing farmer, the legacy farmer, needs that to say, okay, good, I'm okay with giving it up. My family's gonna be okay, my legacy's gonna be okay, my farm is gonna be okay, you know. And then the other part is the farmer that's gonna take it over, the beginning farmer, that's a good thing too, but I hate to say it, but talk is cheap. You gotta walk it out. You have to be able to say, this family benefited from this, and let the family show Yes, there is this. But this is notorious, is that there's things out there that's available, but if nobody's walking us to it and through it, and we can't get to it, then what good is it doing the farmer, the family, the beginning farmer, all of that? So it's like, walk it out. You know, we're the marketers. We're the ones that's going to say, hey, this helped our family. Hey, my son got to start farming because of this benefit from the state.
Yeah. One thing that I think would be quite helpful, certainly in Indiana and maybe in Ohio and other states that are here, is that, and I'm really going to talk about this from an angle of climate change. So farms overall can have a great impact on what is happening on land and soil and in the water that we all depend upon to drink from. So as far as I know, every state in the United States has some component of soil and water conservation. And in Indiana, I think one of the things that would be really beneficial is if we had block grants set up that came from the state and were given to all the different counties that had soil and water conservation offices, allow them to invest that money, to pull from it, create mini grants for farmers, to enlist these ideas that are on the cutting edge about how do we save the water that's coming down from the skies, and how do we allow it to infiltrate very slowly, filter down through the soil, and give us a much cleaner water versus simply running off at a quick rate. We're dealing a lot now with these rains that are extremely strong, that last very short period of time. Juan Carlos said it's like being back in the tropics. It's really strange weather that we are experiencing overall. And so farmers can't do it all. They have to have someone help them. And the state, every state can do that by rolling out education programs, helping farmers understand we have funds available, you can tap into these, it's a simple process, and we are here to support you.
We have another question over here from the audience. And while she's getting the mic, I would add on the note of climate and water, it would be great if we could get our wetland protection back.
Oh my goodness, that is my question. That is my question. So
We must be like linked up or something in our, some hive mind going on.
yes, so I do serve in the Indiana legislature, and I appreciate what Mark said about 1/3 of Indiana had been wetlands long ago, and this whole idea of just a couple years ago, we removed some protections for wetlands, and I know one of the motivators behind that was trying to figure out land rights and usage. I mean, there are so many complicated factors here, but how do we find a balance with protecting wetlands, and also when you live in a state that I think the phrase draining the land, how do we find a balance? Because I feel that there is this tension at the State House with our environmental advocates and our farming advocates, when I feel there's so much common ground there, to use a great metaphor, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you for that, because I think wetland preservation is very important, and farms have done a moderately good job of that. But as you say, there's a conflict there. There's a conflict in that the factory that the farmer uses, which is the land to grow the food, is in conflict with that wetland. The frustration that I've seen in farmers, and have even experienced it ourselves, is preparing land for cultivation, and maybe the agent comes out and says, you know, you're good except for this 1/4 acre that's in the middle. And yeah, as nonsensical as that seems, it's either, okay, we've got to decide whether we're not going to clear that land for the 1/4 acre, or if you're going to allow us to mitigate that some other way. So I think wetland mitigation is at least one of the solutions to that. If someone wants to expand a field beyond what it currently is, and it has a small amount of wetland in it, which happens a lot in Indiana, then at least give that farm, or maybe require that farm to mitigate that somewhere else in the state or in the community that's helpful, into a parkland, into a part of a land adjacent to a state forest or a state park. Expand that to do that. So I think mitigation is probably one of the solutions to that. It's probably not the ideal, and it's probably not what you all want to hear, but that is sort of a common sense way to take care of these 1/4 acre, 1/2 acre little plots that come back to us and say, you know, we can't allow you to do that because there's a 1/4 acre of wetland in there. Well, okay, let's find a solution to that. And we have worked through the USDA to solve those, but it's not an easy process. With WOTUS, it's not an easy process, and I think there was some that want to resurrect WOTUS in the bad way, and that's not particularly helpful to the farmers that feed America. And that's part of the farming paradigm that we may not like to acknowledge, but it's out there, and there needs to be some mitigation effort or mitigation opportunity to help that along.
Denise, Robert, would you like to add anything to that?
Maybe one thing is that I think that, you know, the wetlands is a really important issue. I agree with that. And I would say that, you know, the USDA and other entities are very willing to invest in the sense of helping farmers to grow a lot of the commodities and to price control. What about the issue of helping farmers to grow a green future? And why can't the U.S. government really invest heavily in that, in ways that a farmer can rely upon a section of their land to no longer be growing a particular type of food, but rather be creating and growing a wetland which has far-reaching benefits to all of us. So an annual investment, not a small payment, but something that equals or exceeds what they would gain from that land if it were planted with a commodity crop.
I think there's some tension there between, for commodity growers that need to expand, but changing that paradigm, whether it comes from payments from the government or changing a paradigm to where we're not farming at these non-human scales anymore, can make it more possible to protect our wetlands into the future. I knew I hadn't looked this way. I've got 2 questions back here.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong produce farmer from California, so I was really interested in the comment that the state imported 98% of its produce, and California's hurting produce production from water issues and availability of labor, and labor that costs more than a minimum of $20 an hour, $25 an hour with taxes on top of it. And I wonder, Mark, you mentioned infrastructure, but I also wonder about just the knowledge base that's left the state. You know, is it there in the extension agency and in the schools to teach about vegetable production and make it possible for commodity farmers to put some of their land into producing produce?
Yeah, good question. I agree. I would say there is some of that knowledge in the state, but there's not enough. And I don't think that knowledge base will come. It's almost a chicken and egg thing. The knowledge base will come when someone has the forethought to build the infrastructure to put in place that needs it, and then they would educate the farmers on, okay, what do we need in a sweet potato? What do we need in a green bean? What do we need in whatever produce you're talking about? California is a prime example of it probably, I don't know, produces probably close to 50% of the produce that's consumed in the United States. Well, with water issues out there, and water issues are coming to Indiana too, I want to tell you, we have to do a better job at diversifying the geography of growing that produce. And I think education is going to be a big part of that. The bigger part of it, though, is the cost of the infrastructure. We've got to do a good job, and maybe the state policy-wise can go back. You know, IDC does a great job in acquiring land and building for the future in certain parts of the state, but maybe some of that money can be used to looking at agriculture and how Indiana can grow its own produce to consume, not only for Indiana, but the surrounding states. Because we are the breadbasket of the Midwest here. I know Iowa and Illinois is going to argue with that, but some of the best soils in the world are right here in Indiana. There you go.
There was another question.
I'm Chris Baggett, Tender Pond Farm. We're a regenerative grass-fed beef operation in Hancock County. This is a perception. I'd like you to help me if this is real, that there's an incentive with crop insurance to now start farming a lot more marginal land. In our county, I mean, I see trees being cut down every single day along roads just to get, it feels like, an extra 20 yards of corn and soybeans. And my understanding is that's because crop insurance incents the farmer to do that. Is that accurate?
That may be true, but going back to what I think Robert alluded to, you know, years ago, and I think it's still in place to some extent, the federal government had the CRP program in place. And I think there is still some acreage in that. But a CRP program that paid the farmer, the farm landowner, a living wage, if you will, to keep that wetland in place, you know, would get signed up all the time. Crop insurance, I'm not so sure. I'd have to think about that, Chris, because crop insurance is extremely expensive, extremely expensive. I just got our bill the other week, and I'm kind of shaking my head. And I know there's a lot of farmers that at the end of the day, can I afford to pay this? Because it is not cheap. And I wouldn't choose to clear a piece of land because I thought the crop insurance would pay for it, but I'm not going to say that doesn't happen out there. I guess it depends on the scale, probably. But I think a solution that I just happened to think of when Robert was talking is resurrecting at least the CRP program on steroids from a policy standpoint. And that would get to the pocketbook of the farmland owner and the farmer to help mitigate some of the wetland issues that we were talking about earlier.
We have another question right here.
It's not so much a question, but sort of an intervention of how we frame wetlands. And so much of it has to do with how, as a society, we see the Environmental Protection Agency and its role. So part of what the EPA had been trying to do with regard to wetlands and its protection was to bring them within the fold of the Clean Water Act and waters of the U.S. And that was basically blocked by Congress as an overreach on the part of the EPA. And part of it is the status of the EPA, right? It's not a cabinet level agency. You have an administrator. And then when you think about where we are with climate change and the need to just elevate, how the USDA and other agencies operate. It's just not farming. It's about the impact on climate and the impact in environmental justice communities. So to just not give protection to an isolated wetland, I don't see how that's going to help us further along. And then when you have the states' rights people blocking that, then it becomes so complicated from state to state. But fundamentally, it's whether wetlands, isolated wetlands, are within the protection that will guarantee all Americans clean water, access to clean water, and mitigation against climate change and wind and all the other things. We saw what happened in Louisiana when wetlands were gutted, and there was no barrier to break, right? The impact of, hurricanes after hurricanes. So we need to see the wetlands as basically the lungs of America, and to protect it as much as we can, and to balance the interests, in favor of the environment. I think that's critically important. So I think it's an interesting place because it is part policy, it is part how we perceive how we're going to live in this special climate change, or some call the Anthropocene, this new era of humanity. How are we going to balance these competing interests? That's kind of what I have to say.
We have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Thank you. Joel Greeno, farmer, Kendall, Wisconsin. Just to the elected officials and some of the questions that were directed toward them. First and foremost, we need to protect the rule of law. And you need to utilize your state's attorney generals on all of these ag issues. Otherwise, we're going to lose that rule of law. Talked to a lady before this meeting started that is just got their notice from DFA, Dairy Farmers of America, that they're probably not going to be milking cows anymore because they're not going to take their milk. Well, in 2004, Ali Ramadan from our U.S. Department of Justice did an investigation into the U.S. dairy industry. That investigation ran 2 years. He found the U.S. dairy industry more corrupt than Enron. And the three companies investigated in that investigation was Dairy Farmers of America, Dean Foods, and National Dairy Holdings. Ali Ramadan was fired by the U.S. Attorney General Roberto Gonzalez under George Bush. 30-year veteran with a perfect record, terminated. So in 2010, National Family Farm Coalition had a meeting in D.C. where Mark Tobey came, a representative from DOJ, and I specifically asked him, why do you not enforce antitrust? And he kind of hemmed and hawed and stumbled around, and he said, well, technically the law is not the law anymore. It's like, really? So what is it? And he said, well, we like to call it the greater good. I said, well, could you define what the greater good is? And he said, well, we've been instructed, not to honor antitrust. We've been told that if total vertical integration will feed us cheaper, we're not to stand in its way. Well, 13 years later, here we are all still fighting the same fight. And so I testified before the DOJ in 2010. I said, you have to reopen that case and finish it. So Christine Varney, that was the head of the antitrust division of DOJ under Eric Holder, tried to reopen the case, was not allowed to, and resigned her position. Our elected state officials need to push their attorney generals to unify with other states' attorney generals on these issues and push that forward. Otherwise, we're all going to continue to lose in this fight because, you know, we talk about all these issues and how hard it is to fit into the system when we're talking about $1 million combines, $750,000 tractors. You know, it's impossible to survive. Now we have UAW on strike, and God bless them that they have a union that represents. But you got people going from $50 an hour looking for $70 an hour. And, you know, I put in what hours I can on my farm during the day, and then I work for Ocean Spray Cranberries 12-hour night shifts. I have kids in a different town, and so, you know.
And meanwhile, the farmer share of the dollar is about 13 cents, right?
Exactly.
I do want to make sure we leave room for this other question over here, but thank you.
But absolutely just wanted to let them know, you know, we need to utilize our state's attorney generals in these issues just to maintain that rule of law and keep this process, you know, so we have it to use when we need it.
Absolutely. Use your voice. One more question over here.
How's everybody doing? Ty Simmons, farmer, food advocate. Young man said that where's the people with the knowledge in produce? We have the knowledge here. We just need more of our state reps, our advocates to assist us for more of a bottom-up approach. The trickle-down approach doesn't work anymore. We have to build the farmer and the farmers up from the bottom so we can educate them better, so we can create a better farming solution. We're here and we're coming, okay?
All right. I do want to close out with one last question for our panel here. I'm wondering if each of you can speak a little bit to what solutions or innovations or opportunities you think hold the most promise for building a thriving future for our Indiana farmers.
Well, it's going to be pretty short for me. I think you've already heard it. It's going to be diversification and direct consumer. Continue that march toward the consumer. Cut out the middleman. Take what the middleman has and use it to sustain your farm.
I think for me, it's more about trying to really educate the youth. Bring the youth to your farm, open it up for that space, engage with other entities who can table at your farm and bring their expertise to sort of help create a rounded picture of what it's like to grow food, and that you can successfully do that as a small-scale farmer. However, you must use all the resources available to you. You have to reach out and create all of these collaborations that I spoke about earlier.
Denise, where are the opportunities?
The opportunities for Indiana and planning for our success. A meteorologist told us a couple of summers ago that Indiana would deal with like 6 degrees change in the climate change. Although it's a small amount of degree of a change, it's going to make a big change. So I say that to say that the 6 degree separation law is, you know, you are only so many people away from opportunities and knowing and being a part of connecting, building the agriculture in Indiana. I think that the connection with the kids, there is a generational gap from the family farm that I grew up on to the youth of today not knowing the farm, not knowing where their food came from. So that little bit of a difference of us coming together in this state, working together, and having that 6 degree of separation rule. You know, I think that going back to knowing town to town, market to market, and being able to know who's your farmer. We're the Hoosiers, so knowing who's your farmer. Yeah.
Forget about Kevin Bacon, it's 6 degrees to your farmer, right? So to all of the legislators and electeds in the room, I think you heard it right here. We need support with education, we need support with diversification, and we need support in building those connections so that farmer stories are being told and that they can thrive into the future. Thank you. Everybody, panel, please give them a round of applause.